Sure. All right, well, off that, we're going to go ahead and hop into learning about book groups at UW-Tacoma. And I'm going to go ahead and let our two guests, Johanna and Elena, take it away, tell you guys all a little bit they're building for all of us over in Tacoma and virtually. Thanks, you guys, for being here.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be with this group today. I get to talk about my favorite part of my job, and I'm so lucky that I get to do this as part of my job. My name is Johanna. My pronouns are she, her. And before I get going to talk about Real Lit and Staff Reads, which are two book clubs that we run at UW-Tacoma, I'm going to offer a brief land acknowledgement. We recognize that all of us at UW-Tacoma learn, live, and work on or near the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people. In particular, our campus is situated on the traditional territory of the Puyallup. And since we're gathered virtually, we also want to acknowledge the lands of the Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Suquamish, Duwamish, and all the other traditional lands we might be on. If you want to toss and chat where you are zooming in from, that'd be really fun to see. Next slide, please. I love this. So what is Real Lit? We founded Real Lit in the fall of 2018. We started in the summer as intentional co-programming between the library and the Center for Equity and Inclusion on UW-Tacoma campus. And we looked at our strategic plan, at the UW-Tacoma strategic plan, and decided that it would be important to have spaces that were not curricular, that were not grade-based, to be able to have discussions about the experiences on campus that students, faculty, and staff are having and community members, which is where our social justice theme emerged, where our focus on own voices texts emerged, which are texts written by authors who share the identity of the protagonists that they portray. We also firmly root our group in the philosophy that by interacting with narratives that reflect different experiences from our own, we can dialogue with peers and learn and build empathy. It's a way to reduce isolation on a campus that is a heavy commuter campus. It's peer-based discussion, right? It's peer-to-peer learning as opposed to hierarchical learning, which has a huge benefit. A few other equity issues we built in: students receive free copies of the book. We consistently have staff and faculty representation, and it is, note to everyone here in the group, open to all campus members across all three campuses. And I'll ask you to move to the next slide. Oh, and those are all the titles we've read. Sorry, those are everyone we've read so far. You can imagine that COVID forced a re-envisioning of Real Lit, and thus was born Real Lit Remote, which we launched in spring quarter of 2021, so almost a year ago, where we decided intentionally to host actually 2 sessions a week as opposed to just one, so that people could flexibly drop in to one or both, depending on needs. And we saw both models. We saw people coming either Monday or Thursday, or coming to both. We actually have had a higher attendance since we moved remotely, which is fascinating to observe. And it led to a request for summer programming, which is normally a quarter we have off. But one thing I want to bring up for book clubs, as you began to think about maybe creating your own, is that we kept a couple of building blocks. How do I want to put it? We kept a couple of building blocks stable as we transition to online. First, we were intentional in our selection of texts. I think it really matters to think about the text you are choosing for a reading group. So examining the hyphenated experience, the identity of students' own voices, social justice, keeping that as a constant. We work very strongly to co-create community agreements that center anti-racism and that are grounded in an anti-oppressive framework, and Elena will talk a little bit more about that. Part of this helps decenter power dynamics in a group when there may be faculty members present for students. And I think that's a huge part of the space creation. We include weekly icebreakers that tie to the text, that allow reflection on your own experiences. And what that has enabled is getting to know each other, which is huge, I think. But it also means that folks who may not have read that week feel like they can feel empowered to participate. And I think that's a huge part of the barrier that stops people from coming to a book club, is that they may not feel like they can participate if they haven't read. And we're very explicit about saying, come anyway. We're here for community. We center the community aspect above the analytical reading aspect. I'll ask you for the next slide, Anne. And anytime there's questions, pop them into chat. We're going to have time to answer your questions at the end of all of this. Benefits, well, no, what I want to say is community building benefits stand out as front and center to me. And I want to read this quote from a participant. Real Lit during COVID meant so much to me because I appreciate the community and safe space it gave me to have meaningful discussions, even beyond the context of the book we read. And that just highlights that community centering piece that we were very intentional about. Next slide, and then I'll pass it on to Elena. All right, what if you want to get involved? So you can reach out to any one of us 3 librarians and we will help you talk about what it might take to create your own group. We have a link to a toolkit that talks about some of our pedagogy and philosophy and has some examples of promotional materials. You're welcome to take a look at that open educational resource. And then finally, Real Lit is actually welcome to any one of you. We focus on YA young adult voices, which tend to be issue driven and focus on, as we said, issues relevant to our community of learners. But you are welcome to join us spring quarter. We do not yet have a title, but stay tuned. That will be advertised over social media. Elena, I'll pass it off to you.
All right, go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm Elena Bull, she, her pronouns. I am also a librarian at UW-Tacoma, and just wanted to plug one more thing about Real Lit is at the end of every quarter, we try and have an author talk with the author. And apart from, I think, 2 times we've been able to do it. Ours is coming up next Tuesday. It is with Randy Ryby, who wrote Patron Saints of Nothing. If you want to attend, it is open to everyone. You just have to register with that link there, the bit.ly, and we will send out the link to the author talk the day before. And it's a chance to actually ask questions directly to the author and listen to his process and thoughts behind why he wrote what he did. So go ahead and advance a slide again. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Staff Reads, which is our other book group. This one is more limited. If anyone here happens to be employed by UW-Tacoma in any capacity, you can join. But because this one is funded by our staff association at UW-Tacoma, it does have to stay with Tacoma staff. After 2 successful iterations of Real Lit, the staff association approached us and asked us if we would want to do something similar, focused on professional development for the staff. So we used a lot of the framework that we had put in place for Real Lit to create a staff-focused book group. We used the Aorta Facilitation Guide, which I can drop into chat, as one of our main ways we constructed how both Real Lit and Staff Reads would be facilitated. Aorta is the Anti-Oppression Resource Training Alliance. And this really had us center those anti-racist approaches and how to create a community without a hierarchy within a group. So we borrowed a lot of the community agreements from our Real Lit group and had the staff group rewrite them. We again integrate our land acknowledgement at the start of every one of our sessions. But in this one, what really differs from Real Lit is we focus on nonfiction and we focus on topics that are relevant to the higher ed experience, whether they're issues that students would face or staff or faculty. We're looking at nonfiction issues. Currently, we are finishing up Life of the Mind Interrupted, which is a collection of essays on mental health in higher ed, written from the perspective of a former faculty member and her experience both as faculty, as non-tenured faculty, and as a grad student. We've also examined issues of ableism and I'm blanking on our others, ableism.
Undocumented students in higher ed, Elena, that was.
Non-documented students in higher ed. And that one we had a fantastic author talk with the author. We don't always get author talks for the Staff Association books, but we do try. And other than that, it's just another approach to a community of reading and engaging. Similar to Real Lit, the focus has been on community building as opposed to discussion of the literary text. We do the community building through the discussion, but the point is community, not do we understand this text perfectly? And that has allowed quite a bit of engagement. So staff reads, if you are affiliated with UW Tacoma, please reach out and join us. We would love to have you. Go ahead and advance the slide. And this is just a slide from when we did our author talk over the summer. Staff Reads had started out as a every other quarter book group, but with that pivot to online with COVID, we have started doing it every quarter, and it has become kind of a self-sustaining group that the members itself choose our next reading and facilitate the discussion. And I think I'm ready to pass it over to Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you both, Johanna and Elena. My name is Hannah. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from the UW Bothell and Cascadia College Library. And I am going to talk a little bit about our Community Reads program, which is a pretty different way of forming a book group, but hopefully you'll still find something valuable in it. So the Community Reads program started several years ago based on somewhat similar premises to the Real Lit and Staff Reads programs. We wanted to gather people from the community. We wanted to read something together. Some of our goals are to build community through a shared intellectual experience. So reading something together, getting to know one another through talking about that reading, and getting to know the reading itself better, and to educate ourselves and one another on issues of social justice. So Community Reads happens quarterly, and in its initial inception, it was pretty similar to the Real Lit and Staff Reads program. It was kind of a book club. We would read a book for a quarter and have an event where people would come and discuss. We had discussion questions, and people would discuss either in small groups or large group, depending on how many people came. But in the last few years, we've been really transitioning our program into something kind of different. Next slide, please. So we've been really, I'm describing this as kind of a broadening and a deepening at the same time. We have, in the last couple of years, we've been changing our scope from being about a book to being about a shorter reading and focusing more on the issue within the reading itself. So this started in the 2019-2020 school year when we read the book Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. And we normally would have just chosen the book for one quarter and had discussion questions to relate to it. But instead, we decided to focus on the book all year and to emphasize other resources, to emphasize different themes within the book. So for one quarter, we would choose a chapter or an excerpt from the book, and then we would pick another resource that related to it. So one quarter we read chapter 2, which is about mass incarceration in the criminal justice system. And we also showed clips from Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th. So we were trying to increase interaction with the theme as well as just with the book. And this only continued in our transition to a virtual environment because, as you all know, COVID hit last March and we transitioned to online. And so unlike the Real Lit and Staff Reads programs, we did not move to Zoom. We did consider that, but we decided not to for a couple of reasons. The first was we weren't sure about our ability to facilitate and kind of read the room on Zoom. And the other was we were noticing with ourselves and with others that people's time was being used differently, that people had different kinds of mental capacity to devote at different times. And so we transitioned to an asynchronous environment. We moved all of our content to Canvas, to an online course management system. And this allowed us to really focus on those other related resources, to focus on different activities, on discussion questions, and we hope kind of give people the chance to engage at whatever time, whatever capacity they could. Next slide, please. So this brings us to what we're doing this year, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So for the 2020 to 2021 school year, we chose a theme for the whole year, a larger theme that we would focus on different aspects of each quarter. So this year's theme is environmental justice. So kind of the intersections between environmental movements and other social justice movements. And each quarter we've chosen a different sub-theme and used 3 different resources, a read, watch, listen format, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, to highlight each of those themes. So we've chosen something, a short story or an essay for people to read, a video for people to watch if they want to, and then a short podcast or radio broadcast for people to listen to. And the thinking behind this was that, again, people have different kinds of capacity. You might, especially because we are all looking at screens so much and we weren't able to provide physical copies of the reading. So we thought maybe you are tired of looking at a screen, but you're able to listen to something, or maybe you're having auditory processing issues, but you do want to do the reading or watch a video. So the idea behind this format was to provide different entry points into the material and to let people engage as much or as little as they wanted to. So I want to give a description of what we're doing this quarter, winter quarter, because our content is still up. That is the nice thing about having it be quarterly and having it be asynchronous, is that our content is up through the whole quarter and people can engage whenever and however they want to. So this quarter, our sub-theme is climate migration. So relocation, forced relocation, basically, after climate disaster. And we have, our read is from this excellent book, which is up on screen, and I also have my copy right here, the McSweeney's 2040 AD Anthology. It's a collection of short stories with several different authors portraying their different take on a climate dystopia. It's not light reading, it's kind of upsetting, but the short stories are amazing. And so we've chosen a short story for this quarter called He Are the People by Elif Shafak, and a related video, a wonderful animated poem called The Environmental Refugee Holding Center by Sabrina Mahfouz, and then a short podcast episode just about climate refugees and climate migration from the What Makes Us Human podcast. And that is kind of our introductory material. So all of these resources, each of them has their own module in the Canvas course. They all have some introductory materials, some discussion questions, so that people can engage with them, with any or all of them. There's also a module that encourages people to draw connections between the resources. So there are some really similar themes, there are some similar topics. And we also have a module that is encouraging people to make connections to local issues, so outside the readings. As I mentioned, we've kind of wanted the reading to be the entry point into a deeper understanding of the topic. And so for this quarter, we have a module where we talk about some proactive efforts that various frontline communities, even in Washington, are trying to make to avoid being forced into a position of being climate refugees. So there are some groups who are living in danger zones who would like to migrate if they can, to proactively relocate. And so we wanted to draw people's attention to those efforts, to other kinds of action people can take. We've found sometimes in our conversations, we would always try and have a what's next question. And a lot of times people would be left feeling kind of bad, but not knowing where to put those feelings. And so we really wanted to give people a place to direct any energy they might have. We also have, and I'm going to provide a link to this later, we also have made a zine for our previous content. We've been encouraging different kinds of reflection, artistic reflection, visual artwork, writing, and asking people to submit. And we compiled something from fall quarter into a really incredible zine. Our submissions were wonderful. So anyway, all of this is to say that we would love to have anyone join us for winter. Our Canvas course is available to anyone with a UW Net ID. And so anyone from anywhere is welcome to come engage with our materials. Next slide, please. This is just some resources. We also want to acknowledge that maybe you don't have the capacity to engage with this right now, or you aren't comfortable talking or being involved in this kind of discussion with people you don't know. So all of our resources are available online. So I'm going to send these links in the chat as well. And it looks like, I think Anna mentioned in the chat that you will be getting access to the slides as well. So this first link is our webpage, which is just about the Community Reads program. There's a page for every event we've had, every quarter's theme. And those pages include information about the readings and lists of our discussion questions, our related resource lists that we've made to highlight other resources, and our vocab lists, because we've realized that if you're coming into these social justice discussions, we don't want to assume that everyone has the same foundational knowledge. So we've started trying to compile some vocab lists. So those are all available on our website. The second link is to our Canvas course, and I will send all of these again in the chat. And we welcome anyone who wants to join, who wants to read, who wants to even just look at our content and not engage with it, or to respond to some of the discussion questions, and to submit to our zine, even if you'd like. And that's what the final link is. It's where the zine is available online. And I encourage anyone and everyone to check it out, because our submitters last quarter did some amazing work and we're really proud of it and them. So anyway, that was a lot of information, but that's just Community Reads is another way of doing reading groups. And I look forward to any questions you might have later. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, all three of you. It's really awesome just to learn about the different approaches to reading groups. And I think a lot of people here might be interested in joining, but also kind of figuring out how can you start something and what could the different formats look like. So it's really awesome to kind of see those two sides and all the different ways to, make your reading group accessible and also build that community engagement piece. Right now, we have a few minutes before we move on and just talk about a few other groups at UW and just also how to connect with reading groups in your greater community. Does anyone have any questions for Johanna, Elena, or Hannah? You can go ahead and raise your hand or send them in the chat. Obviously, you can see we got their emails here. You're welcome to reach out to any three of them. They're wonderful resources at UW. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. It doesn't look like any questions are coming in or hands raised. Again, you can reach out at any time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on here. So there's a few more reading groups at UW that I wanted to highlight who couldn't be with us today to kind of share from those who put on the group. So I'm going to just give us a little bit of an intro to those. An interesting point is you'll see those two groups are actually reading the same book this coming spring. So you could read the book one time, maybe you already have, and then you'll be able to engage with both groups and maybe see if you really like one or you like both, or it just gives you a chance to engage with both. So the first is UW Alumni Book Club. Their website, I just pulled a quote here. It's an online forum for the curious reader. The bookshelf has a place for personal stories, timely topics, and transformational fiction. This book club is sponsored by the UW Alumni Club, UW Libraries, and University Bookstore together. So those three powerhouses all kind of help pick books and steward this group. There's different parts to it. They read a book every 2 months. They have regular emails that you can subscribe to their email listserv. They'll give you suggested timelines and share other resources, check in with you intermittently. They also try to bring in authors and have additional events around the books they're reading. That's in addition to the open book discussion. So it just seems like a good community to point out. This coming spring, right now they are reading How to Be an Antiracist by Ibram Kendi. I feel like this has kind of been a book of the year, so many of you might have already read it. They are starting that reading period March 18th. There's a ticketed event with Ibram Kendi coming on Zoom. I guess he's not coming to campus, but coming on Zoom with us. It is, like I said, it's a ticketed event, but that's something I would highly recommend you check out. And again, you know, even if you have a chance to read the book or you don't, those book chats are a great way to build community and get to know other people around a topic. So I would highly recommend checking out that in May. Similarly, the UW IT has a diversity, equity, and inclusion community of practice group, and they host all sorts of opportunities around community building, talking about issues of DEI, events, and now a reading group. And they as well are focusing on Ibram Kendi's book this spring. That their reading is coming up a little bit faster, but as you can see up on this image, they've split it up into 4 sessions. So we've missed the first one. The second one is next week, the third one March 24th, and then to wrap up the book in April. So that's kind of a little bit of a different model where they're meeting every 4 times to talk about specific chapters. I highly recommend you check that out as well if you're interested in this book club, and each quarter they pick a new book. The links for these you can find on these slides, and again, we'll get you those slides. Lastly, to follow up with that, you know, if you're really looking to build community and find a reading group outside of, you know, maybe who you're already connected to, one resource I highly recommend outside of just Googling, you know, reading books near me. We've talked in the past about searching your local library or looking outside of UW is Meetup. So Meetup is a platform that it's all around the world. There's local and there's, you know, it's global. So you can find events, activities, really on any topic. But one thing that is great about Meetup is they have established reading groups through Meetup where you can find a topic on anything. I just grabbed a screenshot of these 9 topics. There are a ton of topics, and that's just for the Seattle area. There's smaller groups, and then there's groups that have up to, you know, 3,000 people on there. Read for Fun Book Club Seattle. These book clubs traditionally, they would, there's organizers for the group who'd set meet times so you could actually go meet in person, and maybe they'd rent out a space and meet people in person. Obviously now we're going virtual, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there, especially if maybe you speak another language or you're learning another language, maybe you want to connect with another culture. You could join a book club in Germany, or you could join a book club, you know, somewhere else in the United States. And it's a really awesome opportunity to kind of connect with other communities and get outside of our bubble. So I highly recommend you kind of check that out. I put the links on this page as well. And again, that's Meetup. That is really kind of all we have for you today. I hope you guys, you know, just feel a little bit extra inspired to go out and find a reading community, join one, even if it's just intermittently here and there, dropping into book club discussions. You can, you know, learn a lot about yourself and others. And personally, I find it a great way to really reflect on the reading you're doing and maybe bring new thoughts to the forefront you hadn't already thought about while you were reading the book. Does anyone have any questions? And obviously, if you're in any other groups you want to share, go ahead and share those links to me or in the chat, and we'll get that out to the group.
I have a question for the group, which I'll just pose. I'm okay if there are no answers to it, but maybe it's something to think about. What are the barriers you perceive for joining a book club? I mean, sometimes my fear is that I don't have time and I won't do the reading, and then it turns into this spiral of failure in my mind, and that's a terrible space to be in, right? So I'm just curious about how you think about the barriers, and then Hannah and Elena and I can reassure you. And if you don't need to answer if you don't want to, but we're definitely here for those chats as well.
Yeah, my biggest barrier is time management. Full-time worker, full-time parent, full-time dog owner, full-time cat owner. There's a marriage in there. I mean, it's just, all of the stuff that has to happen around my life, and it's always about the time. So if I say I'm going to do it and then I can't do it, and I've already said no to like 5 other organizations that I'm interested in being involved in. So it's just, pick one thing, Kara.
So I will share. With the switch to COVID, I have 2 small kids and they come with me to book club meetings at least once a month because it's just the way life is these days. But it also is nice that we are allowed and able to do that. That being said, particularly with Real Lit and staff reads, we pick a book that's under 400 pages and we section it out so that each week we're only reading 20 to 40 pages to make it accessible. And then also we build our conversations around the themes and the ideas and not necessarily the actual literary content. So let's talk about family and how this really is reflected in this text, but also how you see that reflected in your life. So at least for the book groups I'm involved in, we all know how hard balancing is and try to make it as accessible regardless of that.
My 14-year-old and 11-year-old have yet to opt in and join. However, I'm reading books you would enjoy. I know you would like this book, but that's a different question. Kara, just to validate, that juggle has just gotten worse with COVID, right? And it
Yeah,
is.
there's no way my 17-year-old would participate.
I hear that, and I think the bit that we have modeled as facilitators of the group not having read. I come in and say, I didn't get to it this time. I'm here because I want to be with y'all, which is true. It's really the space of joy in my work these days is meeting up with these communities. And sometimes I just sit and listen, and we've modeled that, and it feels good to reduce that sense of internal guilt that I spiral into very quickly. So
I think also it's important to remember, there's no right or wrong way. I mean, I'm sure there's some guaranteed wrong ways to do a book club, but just within, you can't say that there's never something bad. But before I spiral into that, I was just going to share that I was talking to a woman who's in a book club, and what they do is they read books that they're on professional development. So obviously the chapter structure is a little different, but what they do is every person in the group reads a different chapter. So your requirement is really only to read one chapter, and then each time they meet, they present on the 2 people who read that chapter kind of tag team and share it with the group and then discuss. And obviously, you might not be able to do that with a fictional chapter book that has a storyline, but it's a great model. I think that could work for a lot of different ways, even if you're just in a small group or even with your family. So yeah, it's great to hear from all 3 of you about kind of those different models and ways you can make your book club work for you.
I think something that also might help, at least for me, to take the pressure off sometimes when thinking about book groups is that I think, I don't know if it's just me, but I think there are a lot of people who will probably fall into the trap of feeling like they need to have good thoughts about the book or need to say the right thing. And I think I know people who've been in book clubs where they say, yeah, we meet, we don't actually talk about the book. We meet and we assign ourselves a book, and then we come in and we just talk about our family and our lives and also I think the crucial thing that differentiates meeting with a book club from like discussion in a class is reaction. And I think book clubs are, I know I'm a person who tends to think out loud, and I really like to talk to other people about things that I'm thinking. And I feel like book groups are a really great place to say, I read something and it made me feel feelings and I want to talk about those feelings. You don't have to come into a book club with your essay written, you don't have to I think I think that's a really understandable feeling, and I won't say that I'm free of it either, but I think that something that is really valuable about a book club is that it's just a place to come and share what you were thinking without the pressure to have those thoughts be anything in particular.
All right. Well, thank you all for hopping on today. It's great to talk with you guys and hear a little bit about the different programs at UW we can join. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your Friday. And again, we'll get these slides to you. We'll get the recording up on our group webpage. And I'm sure you'll hear from me via email sometime in the next few weeks. I hope you guys can join us for our own book club, hopping right off this session at the end of March. All right, you guys will have a great afternoon. And thanks so much, Johanna, Elena, and Hannah for joining us.